It's my pleasure now to introduce to you Trish McMillan Loehr, who is a certified professional dog trainer and a certified dog behavior counselor. She holds a master's degree in animal behavior. Trish has managed doggy daycares, worked with shelters and rescue groups, taught classes, trained dogs, cats, and horses. During her 7 years with the ASPCA, Trish was director of the Animal Behavior Department at the ASPCA's New York City shelter. Helped assess and rehabilitate animals from cruelty, hoarding, and dogfighting cases. She also helped create and present several popular webinars on dog and cat behavior and handling. Trish volunteers at Asheville Humane Society and owns Loehr Animal Behavior in North Carolina. She is the personal staff of Theodore of Pibbling, with Theodore's social media fame. I'm really looking forward to finding out more about Theodore of Pibbling. Will you please put your hands together to welcome Trish?
All right, welcome. Now we're on to the behavior part of today's talks. I am really excited to see my shelter behavior peeps. Where are you from the last 2 days? We have been in an actual Australian shelter, playing with dogs, clicker training cats. It's been such a hoot. It's great to have so many familiar faces here now. So I'm going to talk to you today. This is a special request from Nell. This is a problem we all have, sheltering the hard-to-shelter dog. How many of you have dogs in your shelter who are just not coping well? Like everybody. That's my first shelter dog on the screen. I took one look at that face as a young trainer and I said, that must be my dog, I need her. And she was the epitome of the hard-to-shelter dog. So this is what we're going to go through today, a little bit of an outline. There are a few definitions. I just want to make sure we're all speaking about the same things. Talk a little bit about quality of life, what exactly makes some dogs harder to shelter. We're just going to focus on a couple of the things because they only gave me 45 minutes. We'll go over some of the signs of distress and a number of things you can do in the shelter and out of the shelter. I'm afraid the answers for some of these dogs is get them out of the shelter. We'll talk about ways to do that. You guys are all familiar with the 5 freedoms. I'm sure this is an animal welfare community. This is what we aim for with shelter dogs, try to get all of the 5 freedoms. The first 3 are kind of a given. I'm hoping they're all getting those in your shelters. The last 2 are where it becomes problematic, especially with your dogs who don't cope well with the shelter. How about this little guy in the picture? How many of those 5 freedoms is he missing just because of the way he's been cared for in the past? So here's a few things that conventionally make dogs harder to cope with in the shelter. We'll talk a little bit about over-arousal, the different types of poor kennel presentations. I'm just going to touch on fear issues. I'm mentioning them here because a lot of the things we're going to do for your over-aroused and kennel protective dogs are very similar to what helps fearful dogs. So here are my definitions for the purposes of this talk. You talk to any trainer in the world about reactivity, they'll all have a different idea. For me, a dog who is reactive in the kennel is one who is putting on a big display. He's not necessarily an aggressive dog when you take him out of the kennel, but the thing with barking and bouncing and jumping around in a kennel is it's a self-reinforcing behavior. They do it, and the thing they're worried about goes away, so they go, I'm going to do that a little more next time. And it can develop into a huge display that looks a lot like aggression. But for purposes of this talk, the reactive dogs are the ones who are all talk, and when you get them out, they are not showing aggression. The dogs who are showing actual aggression in the kennels are, I think I have some pictures in here. No, I don't. I've got them later. The ones who are showing actual aggressions is the ones that when you take them out, they continue to show aggression. I've got a video a little later on. Stereotypies are a behavior that is purposeless and repetitive. It's not the same as a dog bouncing when somebody goes by. It's a dog who is bouncing the same pattern. The footprints almost land in the same spot every time. It's like a tiger pacing in the zoo. You'll see 9 steps, 9 steps. That's a sign of really poor welfare when you see exactly the same behavior, but not in response to anything. And we'll talk a little bit about over-arousal, which to me is just excitement. That's the same bouncers, but they're sometimes bouncing, they're sometimes barking, they're sometimes doing different things, but it's a state of heightened physiological activity. And to me, the cure for overarousal is a little bit of impulse control, and I have many slides on how to do that. So how many of you have seen any of this in your shelter? The wall bouncers are a common thing where they learn to ricochet off the walls. I've even seen them go off the walls and off the ceilings in shelters that have a ceiling on them. The dogs who hide and tremble, they're definitely showing distress. The finger painters, do we use that term in Australia for the dogs who tread through their own poop and spread it all over the... We want to discourage that. It's a turnoff to adopters, but it's also not good for dogs to learn that it's okay to be dirty. And I took... Fibbling with Theodore was a finger painter in the shelter. Thank goodness it didn't continue in the home. But that's a real turnoff when people see dogs bouncing and spreading it around, and we call it finger painting where I come from. There's a certain amount of barking in a kennel that's normal. It's important. I think a lot of you know that distressed bark. There's a different tone to the repetitive, high-pitched, really distressed dog barking. And growling and lunging, obviously it's a dog who's uncomfortable with his circumstances. It's also a huge turn-off to adopters. If you have dogs on the floor who are especially growling and lunging at people, they picture that coming to their homes and they keep on moving. So here's a little video of wall bouncing. We'll see if video works. And you can see it's not exactly the same every time. This dog only did it in response to me going by. He has been in the shelter for quite a while, this dog, and he's developing some behaviors that make him not present so well. So the training staff's working with him. We'll talk about some of the methods we're using. Here's another dog who's clearly in distress. I'm just touching a little bit on fear issues, but those of you who are in my body language class, you can see a lot of the things we talked about, the enormous pupil size, the tense face. If you look closely at her thigh muscles, they're actually trembling. So I'm not going to go into fear issues more than that, but that is a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about will help with those types of dogs too. Here's a client's dog of mine. So over-arousal is in response to things. This dog can't even keep it together. It's very unpleasant for his poor owners to try to walk him because he reacts like this to absolutely everything. It's just a heightened state of activity, and even outside of the shelter, this dog has been difficult, so we've been working with him. So here's what I consider reactivity. I think he may be sideways because we're in Australia. We'll see. It's right way up, but squash. So he's responding to me in front of the kennel. He's making noise. It kind of looks yucky if you're an adopter. This dog's name is Lennox. We took him out. We did playgroups. He was great with all of the people. He was lovely and soft with the dogs. He was a good player. That reactive kennel display has been keeping him in that shelter for quite a while. He's in the back room where the people can't see him, but I've got another video of him. I don't have time to show here, but after the play group, and that display was so much lower once he'd been out and socialized with people and been around other dogs. It's really hard to get a video of kennel aggression. I don't want to pick on any shelters. I do not know, to be honest, what this dog would do when he was out of the kennel, but if you looked at the display with Lennox, he had his ears back, his eyes were kind of excited, he was not showing his teeth. This one, when I get a little closer to him, shows the wrinkled lip, the raised upper lip that shows his teeth after a bit. So what I'd want to know about this dog is, does this aggression continue outside of the kennel? This, at the very least, is a big turnoff to adopters. I would not want him up on the floor. If he is a dog who is not displaying this outside of the shelter, I would look into breed rescue. He's a beautiful German Shepherd, or other alternatives for him, but he's not coping well with that particular shelter. And here's your typical fear posture. The little pit bull that I showed you in the earlier slide who was trembling, that fear was completely shelter related. She had clearly never been anywhere that exciting or stressful or loud before, and once we got her into a home, she was 1,000 times better. I don't advise sharing the Kongs with your dog. It's my foster dog, Oliver. I'm just going to touch a little bit on enrichment. If you're not doing enrichment, you're not doing all you can for the dogs, especially your long stay dogs. If you have singly housed dogs or a way to separate them, feeding them with enrichment toys is a great way to help them cope. There's a lot of things you can do in the kennels to make it a more enriching environment. Chewing, I think, is so important to dogs, and I hope one day shelter vets will let us give them more things to chew on. I know that's always it's been a battle everywhere I've been, but if they can have things they can chew, even if it's just cardboard that they can rip up and destroy, it can really defuse the stress. And social enrichment is so important, human enrichment and dog enrichment, and I'm sure all of you know aspcapro.org has some great ideas. Those of you who weren't able to get into my behavior talk the last 2 days, a lot of the material I presented is available in webinar form. Just search my name on ASPCA Pro, and you will get free webinars to train your staff in animal behavior, in dogs and cats. So here are a few cool feeding enrichment toys. I just went through our local animal control, Buncombe County, said, what are you doing for your dogs? And here's what they had in the freezer. They had pipe feeders. That's just made from things at the hardware store that you unscrew one end, put some kibble in, screw it back on. They've been using these for months, and only one got destroyed, and I think the dog managed to unscrew it. They're really super thick plastic. We know about Kongs. I'm also not being paid by Kong, but I love them. Let me try my palm tree. In the top right, you can also seal a Kong into a box. You can give the dog a little surprise to rip up. At the bottom, we have popsicles. That's just wet food, dry food, and water, soaked, put in the plastic cup, take the cup off. Don't let the dogs eat the plastic. But that's a really nice summer treat with summer coming up here. One of the best things you can do, I'll stress again, only for singly housed reactive dogs, is put a food bucket on the outside of the cage. You can see the signage. These are our local shelters, Brother Wolf and Asheville Humane, and they both have excellent behavior programs, and they both have, looks like the same bucket on the outside of their kennels with a little sign that says, I sit for treats. Even if the dog doesn't sit for treats, if the person goes and asks them to sit and gives them a kibble, that will decrease the reactivity every time a new person comes by and give them a much more appropriate kennel presentation. Location can also really help you with these hard to shelter dogs. Some of the dogs do better if they can see more, if they aren't left out of the activity and they've got lots to watch. This is a little coonhound who's at the local animal control, and she is baying at everything. And I'm not sure what the answer is for her. Maybe if she's in a quieter area, she will not display her vocal stylings quite as well to adopters. Maybe if she's in a busy area where she's got lots to see. So move them around, see if you can find a spot that's better. Sometimes with the fearful dogs, putting a crate in there with a cover on it that they can hide in is also helpful. If you've got a dog who's really reactive, like our buddy Lennox, who's just displaying poorly, he was in a staff-only area, but his bio was on the website. Now they've got some lovely video of him playing with other dogs. We went and did some playgroup training there, and people have to come in and see the picture and ask for him, but at least they're not seeing his horrible kennel presentation. I think that will go away in a home. Here's a really cute, creative thing. I'm sure a lot of you have done really creative things now that social media is such a big part of getting dogs placed from shelters. I really like this single brown-eyed female looking for a fun-loving forever home. It's kind of a personal ad for the dog. And sometimes, this kind of went viral a little while ago, sometimes just being honest about the dog. This is a little dog who was horrible, but I love what the shelter did with him, and it did get him adopted within days. get some film students. Surely there's somebody in your volunteer squad who can help you create a good trailer for your hard-to-shelter dogs. Moving back to the shelter, visual input is a huge thing, especially with kennel reactivity. A lot of them are reactive only to dogs, not to people. So this is a hack from Brother Wolf, they do not have tons and tons of money. They just put an X pen around the front of the kennel. She's still got her food bucket. People can still reach that food bucket. And but there's a visual barrier. That dog only barks when other dogs go by. She's quite happy to see the floating heads passing by because they might produce some cookies for her. I'll talk a little bit about the overactive dogs who climb leashes. Here are my quick hacks for dogs who have that habit. It's tough when you bring them out to an adopter and they're going up the leash and they're just trying to play tug and have fun. We put a chain leash on the kennels when I ran the shelter behavior program in New York City. Those dogs were walked on chain. That doesn't taste as good as regular leash. I've also dipped the whole leash in bitter apple. I don't know if you have bitter apple here, but a taste deterrent. I would just put the whole leash in the bottle and take it out. And sometimes just getting a mouthful of that fresh from the bottle would deter them. I've seen people use 2 leashes. I haven't tried that one myself, but let them grab one leash and pick up the other one. And when they grab yours, pick up the second one. What I do with the leash climbers is I keep the leash directly behind their head and keep a little bit of upward tension on it so that it's not dangling in front of their faces. So if you use a collar or a slip lead with an attachment behind the dog, it's better than some of your front attaches or even just a lead that's attached under their neck. Some of these mouthy dogs, your Labradors and dogs that just need to have something in their mouths, just having a walking toy stuck on the outside of their kennel, just put this in their mouth. Some of them are happy to carry a toy on a walk, which is very cute. Adopters love that. If the dog starts coming up the leash and you feel that you're in danger, those of you who are at my shelter behavior talk know about back ties. If you can just get that leash around something. We had a really lovely wrought iron fence across from our shelter in New York City. And if I took a dog out who just started getting over-aroused and grabbing at the leash and coming up toward me, I could put the leash through the wrought iron fence, pull him away from me, and wait until he calmed down and just get a little bit of space. So make sure your walkers know that's an option. And if all else fails, I get a door between me and the dog, put him back in his kennel, or use a door if they're really becoming very hard to handle. But the best solution for many, many, many of these over-aroused or kennel reactive dogs is to get them out of the shelter. You can do a lot with even a weekend foster. We think we have got to get them out to foster for months and months on end. That's not true at all. If you can just get them out for a weekend and get input from somebody and find out what the dog's really like in a home, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior, but past behavior in a home will predict future behavior in a home, not necessarily past behavior in the shelter. I've seen some wonderful excursions. They do beach walks at the shelter here. I'm so jealous of your beautiful beaches out here on Gold Coast. They take a gang of the dogs who are most dog social, take them out on long lines. How many dogs get adopted from beach walks here? I bet people who would never come to your shelter would see them. Adoption Ambassadors program I'll talk about in a little bit. And also, one thing that we have as shelter people, almost all of my dogs were fosters first. If I saw a dog in the shelter that I thought would be a good match for my collection of weird dogs, I'm able as a shelter person to take that dog home for a weekend, for a week, for a month, and test drive them. And we're not necessarily offering that to our adopters. Maybe we should. I think that's a really great way. When I adopted my Doberman, they said, "We will not cash your check for 2 weeks," the rescue group I got him from. No pressure, no anything. If he doesn't fit into your family, bring him back. And that just took all of the pressure of, it's a return adoption, and now I've lost all of my adoption fees. So just something to consider to get them out of the shelter, see what they're like. They're almost always much, much better in a home. This is a little slide. This is one of my favorite volunteers. She's in Peoria, Illinois. I worked with her dogs as a private client. She retired. She is now a volunteer for the ARC shelter. And she does amazing things. She got playgroups going up there. She regularly takes their hardest to adopt dogs. This is a 10-year-old dog, large breed, mixed breed, was not showing well in the kennel. She took him on vacation for a week or a weekend. So here he is on the boat. Here he is with his life jacket. Here he is in the water. She brought him back to the shelter. Somebody walked in the next weekend and said, that's the dog I saw on Facebook, 10-year-old mixed breed large dog. And she took him home. So dogs on vacation, great idea. And I can't even go over all the dogs that she has taken out, done really cool things, put it up on the shelter's Facebook page and helped move some of the tougher dogs along. She's a great trainer too, that doesn't hurt. We always think about enrichment as just walks, and most of us take one dog out at a time. But there are more and more shelters doing group walks up in our area. Both Brother Wolf and Asheville Humane, we live in the mountains of North Carolina. We take the dogs up into the mountains. You probably don't meet as many people as you would on a beach, but we still do meet people. The dogs get out. They post pictures of the dogs having a great time. This is my friend Bobby Bambry, who works with the New Rochelle Humane Society. They take their dogs out on group walks. One thing I would encourage when people are walking dogs is please let them sniff. It's not just about exercise. It will tire them out if they can put their nose down and take in the smells. I kind of think when somebody yanks a dog away from a smell, it's like going to me in an art gallery and yanking me away from the painting I was admiring. It's a little bit rude. And they will be just as tired after a sniffy walk as they will after a brisk march with them being pulled. Another thing you can do is with your reactive dogs, if they've just had a play session with another dog, take them for a walk before they go back in their kennel and start yelling at all other dogs so they have a good experience on leash with somebody they've already played with. And I can't say enough wonderful things about Amy Sadler's Dogs Playing for Life program. If you don't know about it, go to her website. She's got free resources you can download. She has all kinds of cool videos. A lot of these dogs who are reactive in the kennels, when you go in and you take them out and do play groups with them, they're misdiagnosed as dog aggressive. That happened when we did the play groups at Asheville Humane. Everybody was not sure about Lennox with that display in the kennel. That was a worse display with dogs. But once the barriers were gone, he was a lovely player. And that's going to help him get adopted. Many of your adopters have other dogs. Many of them have a desire to walk on leash where there are other dogs. A lot of them want to go to dog parks. So if you can show a little clip of that dog being social, even if they're barky in the kennel, that can help. And dogs do behaviorally deteriorate when they've been in a shelter too long. I really agree with Amy. Get them out of the shelter. So here's a really cool video that she gave me permission to use here. She went to Indianapolis Animal Care and Control. They have almost every dog in the kennel out in these beautiful, huge yards, and it's really sped up the kennel cleaning time for them too.
It's Saturday, May 4th, and I'm at the Indianapolis Animal Care and Control. And we came in at 7 o'clock this morning to work with these volunteers to demonstrate that with a little bit of help, we can get every single dog out of dog adopts at one time, which makes it much easier for them to clean because they have to remove the dogs from the kennels to be cleaned. And in the meantime, they have an off-site adoption event today. So all of these dogs from Dogs Adopts will be much better prepared to behave well and to be appealing for adopters and to have a great time at that off-site event. So thanks to all of these volunteers, we got all of the dogs out of adopts in one shot. And we have over 40 dogs out here. I think it's close to 50. So this is a great day. Indianapolis Animal Care and Control. Amazing staff and volunteers.
Yeah, so get her down to speak here. Get her, at the very least, get her stuff off the web and consider playgroups. It can really help your hard to shelter dogs. If you're going to do playgroups, this is my friend Allie Wasmer. She is now working at Southampton Shelter where Amy started out. And what you need is staff who really understand animal behavior to get started with. You need a place to play. This was at Asheville Humane. They have very small play yards, but we still managed to get quite a few dogs out. And when they're moving around and playing, it doesn't really matter if they're not racing miles to the end. You need to have the time, and you need to have some specific training about what to watch for, when to step in, and here are the supplies that we like to have around. We put the dogs, we did a little play group training. Yesterday, the dogs were on flat collars. We kept leashes dragging, at least for the first part. A small spray bottle is a good thing to have. Amy uses a shake can to interrupt behavior. An air horn can interrupt a fight if it happens. That's just a compressed air horn for boats. That's a good thing to have around a shelter anyway. The little pet corrector up here is just compressed air. It just makes a loud hissing noise and it can deter behavior. And if your staff is going to have the types of dogs who are going to grip when they fight, it's good to have and know how to use a break stick. There's training on that in one of my ASPCA Pro webinars if you didn't make it to the shelter behavior session the last 2 days. And this is what we did at the Animal Welfare League yesterday. We started with the very easy dogs, the adolescents, the dogs who were co-housed anyway. We didn't put 2 co-housed dogs out and add a third one, but we took dogs who had been successfully co-housed just to get the play group started and find out who your rock star dogs are, who the ones are who can help the more difficult dogs when you get more confident with it. But even if you just work with the adolescents, it's really, really helpful to know their play style. It helps you in placing them, and it does wonders for their kennel presentation. We did the intro through a gate. There was some hesitation because there's a lot of barrier frustration at the shelter yesterday, but we used a neutral gate. That was not the dog's kennel. Don't introduce them right at the kennel. Take them to the play yard. There's the new dog coming into the play yard from the outside, and he's yeah. We're looking for affiliative behavior from him before we let him in. And we had one yesterday who came up to the gate and was very barky and lungy through the gate, and we just sent her back. She wasn't ready for a group that large. Maybe she could handle one helper dog. And one thing that's really great is dogs are the best teachers of other dogs. If whether they're fearful, whether they're humpy, whether they're reactive, if you let the other dog do the teaching, amazing things can happen. This is at my house. This is a new foster Doberman. That is my very old matriarch dog peeing in the background, and she is a really good teacher. She's a little unsure about him. He tends to get overexcited, but she gives him a really nice correction without actually touching him in just a few seconds. She's got a bad leg. She's a little protective of that leg. She would like him to slow down a little bit, so here, it's coming up. So he's still bouncing around, but he's doing it a little more carefully. He's not running into the old dog, and there she goes. All right, we can play now. So I didn't have to step in. I could have said, you leave her alone, but I chose to let my dog do the teaching, and it really helped this dog because he had some pretty awkward play skills when I first met him. And here's the surprise for people who were there at the training yesterday. Thank you to my friends who sent me videos. If you have videos I haven't seen yet, please send them. I love slow-mo for just watching the different expressions. I really want to take the little Staffy home with me. He is very much like my dog Theodore. His name is Bear, if anybody needs to go take him home. You can see how much fun these dogs are having. We were out there for about an hour rotating dogs through the group, and I will bet that they showed a lot better once they went in and they were tired. And now we have some great video we can put up of these 3 dogs showing how social they are, which could be helpful to a new adopter who can now picture them in the dog park. Here's the Adoption Ambassador Program. This is a really great way to get dogs out of the shelter. I would say go to ASPCA Pro/ambassadors and look through. They've got webinars, they've got wonderful programs. Essentially, it's empowering fosterers to be the talent agents for their dogs, send them home with the materials, send them home with the adoption forms, allow them to take the checks. And what's been shown is that they will get in a group of people that would never have set foot in the shelter. But if that dog is out at a cafe with an Adopt Me vest on, if he's walking around wherever these folks happen to walk their dogs, they will get exposed to shelter dogs. And it's been a really awesome program. This is a rescue group that is owned by a friend of mine, Aditi Terpstra. She does amazing work. I call her the pit flipper because she can take a dog and turn it around and find it a new home. This is Patrick. He's a staffy type dog who was showing really poorly in the shelter. He was kennel reactive, he was climbing the leash, he was hard for people to walk. Aditi is a wonderful trainer. She took him home. She worked with him on all of his jumping and mouthing, gave him structure, gave him manners, gave him obedience, and he was adopted out within 3 weeks. Look at that face. He's a gorgeous dog, but the way he was displaying in the shelter was not going to get him adopted, so they were lucky that they had this rescue group to send him to, and she is a sensible rescue group owner. She doesn't make you sign over your firstborn child to get a dog. It's a dialogue-based approach. She helps work with people. If you want to have this dog, here's what he needs. How can we help you provide that? Your trainers in your community can be a really great resource, especially if you're a smaller shelter and you don't have training staff. There are plenty of trainers out there who would love to work with shelter dogs, and shelter dogs have honestly been my best teachers as a trainer. You can recruit them for training volunteers, for fostering. There are some at our shelter in New York. We fortunately had the funds to send certain dogs out for boarding and training. So we would send them to a trainer who had a daycare facility. He would help give them some more dog skills and tell us a little more about what they were like. Here's a little program that I started at the ASPCA shelter in New York. I totally stole it from Enrichment SPCA, where my friend Sarah Babcock started it out. And she wanted to secretly recruit the kennel staff into becoming trainers. So she put on, they called it Charm School because it's the South. We moved it to New York, it became a talent show. And she took the training staff, the kennel staff, and the volunteers who wanted to learn how to train a dog, taught them to teach the dog a stupid dog trick. And once people knew how to clicker train a trick, once they knew how to lure a dog into a sit or down, they caught the fever, and it happened at our shelter too. Just training the kennel staff, they're walking the dog 45 minutes a day. I'm not getting 45 minutes a day with every dog if I can get them hooked on training. And we got some wonderful trainers. So we were able to get celebrity judges in for ours. We got lots of media. And best of all for me, these were all dogs from cruelty cases. A lot of them were large bully breed Mastiff-y dogs to get them in front of the TV watching public doing really cute things. Those of you who are trainers will see these are really minor tricks. Really, they're mostly just following the cookie. But the fact that these victims of cruelty are in front of an audience, in front of TV cameras, it really helped get them adopted.
The tricks they've learned for this contest have been taught to them by dedicated staff and volunteers who make their stay with us as close to a home as possible until that day when they find a permanent one.
Crawl?
Kennel dog.
Crawl?
Oh no, he's crawling for the
Crawl?
I have like 7 more minutes of that if you want to grab me at the at lunch break. It's just hilarious, all of these great dogs. Some other interventions that trainers can help you with. The training and the chilling exercises are good to teach. Teaching a dog to relax on a mat is super easy to train volunteers how to do. The mat becomes the relaxation. This is again from my friend Bobby Bambry. Office fostering. I love this picture. This is so an office posture picture. You get the chair's all chewed up. The dog's wearing a belly band so he doesn't pee all over. But that can really help your hard to shelter dogs decompress. As far as training goes, a lot of these are available on aspcabehavior.org. You can get handouts on how to teach all of these things. I'm just going to flip through them quickly. But this is kind of the impulse control suite of behaviors that if a client of mine has a dog who's over-aroused, that golden, this is what we're working through, is impulse control exercises where the dog sees something, they want it, and they don't go get it. They look to you for direction. So we've got wait at the door, any door, every door, kennel doors, doors to the play yard, doors in the home if they're fostered, any of your stay exercises, whether it's a sit or a down, just teaching them patience around that. I love these leave it pictures. It's my friend Erin in California. That's the sequence, and again, this is all available on aspcabehavior.org. Tug with rules is a really great one, putting some rules around tug of war rather than just I grab the leash, I grab your arm, and we continue. It's teaching the dog to wait for permission to take it, playing for a little bit, teaching them to drop it on cue. So she didn't drop it on cue, so she's reminding her. My friend Amy Cook, she's a great trainer in Oakland. And getting to re-engage is the reward for the obedience. And my final point is maybe we're over-behaving a little bit. Emily Weiss wrote a great post on this recently. A lot of these problems will go away in a home if we can get the dogs fostered, if we can get them on excursions, if we can get them out of the shelter, and stop thinking of returns as being the devil. They really aren't. If the dog goes out and they come back and it wasn't a fit, try not to be judgmental with these folks. I've done it. I've taken dogs home to foster. They weren't a fit. I take them back, but I worked at the shelter. We do this all the time. Get a good history, find out what the dog is like in the home, and use that information to find them a better home a better fit the next time. And I'm going to sum up here. So these are final points. Watch for distress in the shelter. Look for alternatives to keeping that dog in a cage. At the very least, do enrichment. If you can, do play groups. If you have trainers to help, impulse control is really the keys to the kingdom, but get them out of the shelter. Thank you.